Boom. We are alive, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. We have a great guest for you, CEO and founder of Joyride, or is it on Joyride Games? Actually, on joyridegames.com, I believe, but just Joyride Games. We'll keep it simple. Omar, it's great to have you on the show today. How you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm been learning so much about games, and you happen to have been working in the gaming sector for longer than I've been thinking about it. So, you want to give us a little bit of background on who you are, what you worked on to start off with?
Absolutely. And so, my background actually, if I go way back, it begins with just an interest in business and media generally. So I began my career at finance and strategy organizations like Bain Capital and McKinsey and sort of traditional, businesses. But I always wanted to build experiences for people, and that was always my passion. And so I moved out to California. I managed to get some product design expertise at a design firm called IDEO. And that gave me a real connection to a process for how to think about building compelling experiences for consumers, right? Like that's what I really cared about, is how do I build something great for many people? That was my passion. And I joke about the fact that if someone had wanted to give me $100 million to make a movie, like I'd happily have made movies to reach consumers and shape their experience. But what I realized was no one wanted to give me $100 million to make a movie but for $100,000, like I could make a game and still reach like millions of people. And as I discovered that initially in the Facebook Canvas ecosystem back in '07, I was truly excited because for the first time, like for me as a person wanting to build these experiences, I could build stuff, I could launch it, I could see what resonated, what didn't resonate, and I could see it go viral and touch millions of people. And so that really began my career in games. I was lucky enough to build on Facebook, and then as obviously the games industry evolved, build on iOS and build on Android. And over the years, really came to specialize in free-to-play games at scale that were approachable, easy to learn, really powered by community. So didn't really specialize in or necessarily get a lot of interest in sort of cycles of hatred, right? Like building games for people where the whole economy is designed to basically pit people against each other over the long term. We really built games that were more community minded and more experiential, but obviously with game mechanics that kept it fun and interesting. And so that journey has really led me to the present. Over the years, I've worked at both small developers, companies I've started or companies that I've been a part of, like Kiwi, like Playdom. But then I've also had the good fortune, as Playdom got acquired by Disney, to be a studio general manager at Disney, building scaled free-to-play games on mobile and on social there as well. So it's been a very exciting journey, and have built games that have had hundreds of millions of installs, and continue to be really passionate about how to build these interactive entertainment experiences that can be more and more closely aligned and identified with their communities, which is what brought me to Web3 games.
And what a trove of new ideas that come into a game or IP when you start to include aspects like ownership. So,
Mhm.
I wasn't really much of a free to play gamer. The first time I'd ever downloaded Fortnite was within this year. So I'd stayed completely disconnected from games. So my interest here is that we have a similar focus, which is how do we get this technology into the hands of as many people as possible effectively.
Mhm.
Um, Tell us some of the ups. Let's start with some of the upsides and the positives that you see this technology brings to the space versus the traditional free to play, and how these two will work together.
Sure. So, like free to play, we have to remember that every new technology, or I would say even beyond technology, any innovation has like a cycle that it goes through in how it disrupts and then forms a new ethos and a new way of doing things. And so I was lucky to be a part of the free to play movement when it first emerged as like a new thing, right? And the revolutionary concept there was, oh, instead of charging people, anywhere from $30 to $80 up front to play a game, we're instead going to actually give away the game to get a lot of people to experience this world that we've created, this experience that we've created. And then the people who are truly passionate about it and who care about it can opt in to actually pay for things in that particular game, right? So that was the positive ethos that free-to-play games evolved into. But obviously, when that first started, there were a lot of exploitative games. There were a lot of tricks that people used, both nefarious as well as design patterns, to basically part consumers from their money in a manner that a lot of traditionalists and purists really reacted to. You also had a lot of traditional game designers who at the time couldn't imagine a world where instead of a curated experience that you've put together that you're then selling, you're actually opening up an experience for everyone, and then just kind of like vulgarizing this art form, right? And so that was like the ethos when free-to-play started, and yet today free-to-play is the dominant business model, especially for casual players on mobile, right? So, but it took almost a decade for that cycle to kind of turn to where now you still have some developers who on the free-to-play side may try and develop exploitative experiences or may try and use design patterns that are negative, etc. But by and large, you have excellence in the free-to-play space and an expertise in the free-to-play place from a design point of view that's broadly acknowledged. I feel like with the injection of ownership as an additional benefit that you can provide your community, that's just another interesting lever to be able to incorporate into game experiences that can align the community more tightly with what you're building and with the experience that they're a part of for an even longer period of time, right? Because the thing that people don't necessarily internalize is the fact that there are games today that are still vibrant with great community and financially successful that have been launched 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Like these are long-lived communities already. Imagine what you can achieve when you inject ownership into the mix, right? However, the danger when you're doing that, especially with a new tool and a new design pattern and like a new area, is that number one, when that new innovation emerges, you will see it expressed in a range of games or a range of titles that don't necessarily achieve excellence, right? Because they're just trying to innovate and figure things out. And in a way, this is the Wild West where you don't know what's going to work. So it's hard to be able to invest $20 million building a great game when you don't even know if this like blockchain thing is for real or not, right? And that's where we were really 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And so I'd say one of the dangers has absolutely been that many of the first generation of titles that people may experience or interact with have not been built with excellence in mind. They have been, in some cases, experiments that succeeded beyond everyone's dreams. And then the teams have like scrambled to try and catch up. Or in some cases, they've been rug pulls or just teams that are exploiting this new emerging space, right? So, but I do think that that's just a question of time. And as now, I feel like we're committed to obviously building excellent experiences with a commitment to knowing that this technology and this capability is here to stay to align communities with us. To me, that's one danger. The second one that I would also want to emphasize is, I've been using this term called play and own as like a label versus play to earn or even play to own. Because at the end of the day, it's play, right? And you need to build a game for players. You don't want to build a game for speculators. You don't want to build a game for financial arbitrage. You also don't want to build a game for min-maxers, right? And that's true whether you're building a blockchain game or whether you're building a traditional free-to-play game. Because if all you have are min-maxers in your game, then you're just an economic engine. You're not providing a game experience. You're not providing an entertainment experience. You're not providing a community experience. You're providing a financial tool, right? And that's not what great games should be focused on. And however, what you have to be cognizant of is that when you're giving people ownership and assets, there is going to be a financial layer that naturally forms on the game that you have to make sure it isn't disrupting your game mechanics, and it isn't disrupting your economy, and it isn't disrupting the play experience for your consumers, and for your community members. And so I think you have to be aware of that, and you have to design for that. But I think it's very important that you're designing an experience that is really focused on being a great game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I view it from the opposite angle of what's most important, because I look at the technology thing that brought me here. I see the game as that kind of the Trojan horse experience that gets the technology to as many people's hands as possible. So I'm like, oh my God, people having ownership over anything is just such an important part of this conversation. But realize that the game is the front end. This is kind of like the entrance door for, or going to be likely going to be the, we'll probably both agree it's probably going to be the entrance door for the next billion people to start interacting, playing with the technology, where you've got iterations on governance and what these economies look like. Because we know there's money in games, there's interest in games. So you guys have two of these kind of suite products that have jumped up in the top of Dapp Radar. You're working on the Flow blockchain. Tell us a little bit about the growth of both Solitaire and Trickshot Blitz. I think they both say Blitz at the end.
Trickshot, yeah, that's right.
They do say Solitaire Blitz as well.
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Solitaire Blitz and Trickshot Blitz.
Awesome. And then a little bit about the Flow blockchain there too.
Sure. So I'd say, taking a step back, we started Joyride Games with the goal of building, the market-leading Web3 publisher of games, and we really went back to the drawing board to think about what that means for us. And what that means is to be an excellent partner to our internal and external studios in building and publishing amazing games. But in Web3, you can't just build a game, you're building an ecosystem, right? Because that game has to coexist inside a web of other products, other relationships, other financial assets. And so you really have to focus on building ecosystems and not just games. And so what we did with Joyride is we really focused at the moment, on two key ecosystems. The first is our ecosystem of mobile, casual, approachable games like Solitaire Blitz, like Trickshot Blitz, and others that are going to be released in the coming months. And that entire ecosystem is powered by Joyride, with both internal and external studios who partner with us to build these games. And what we are providing those studios is a development SDK that accelerates their time to market on their game, by providing them with a token-based economy, a token-based meta game into which they can embed their pool experience or their solitaire experience and come to market a lot quicker. And so we provide the developer SDK and the developer tools. We provide the publishing support in our wallet, in our multi-chain wallet, in our community building, in our growth, in our analytics platform, in all the tooling that you need to build a AAA game, whether it's blockchain or not, right? So we have a developer SDK, we have a publishing platform, and then finally we help those games scale by providing them live ops support, by providing them customer support, by also, again, with the wallet that they've integrated, providing them the support they need across chains and across consumers, to be able to get consumers onboarded to blockchain and into their game really conveniently, right? So that's what we've built and are now scaling with our mobile casual ecosystem with Solitaire and with Trickshot. The second ecosystem that is launching with Tennis Champs is our first NFT-based ecosystem, and we're very excited about it because it's taking our Tennis Champs IP, which are these amazing, lovable characters that have had a Genesis collection with a great set of early supporters. We're building a set of action and sports RPGs in that ecosystem. And we're taking the same approach that we did with our mobile casual games, where in addition, where we are providing the developer SDK, we're providing the publishing platform, and we're providing the scaling support for our sports and action games. But we're also providing the IP support with the Champs NFTs and that IP across those games. And so as a company, we view ourselves as a Web3 publisher, but what that really means is that we are an ecosystem builder. We're building the technology and the capabilities that allow us to have both internal and external studios build games in ecosystems that can support them and help them succeed in garnering millions of players. And so, we've been very fortunate with both Solitaire and Trickshot, where, Solitaire launched about 2 months ago, Trickshot launched about a month ago. They're both, I think, in the top 5 or top 10, blockchain games right now. And it's been a huge validation for us in taking the approach of making approachable games that people can start playing and having a lot of fun with. And then as they play, they discover the value propositions and the additional opportunities that, setting up their blockchain wallet and engaging with the token economy will allow them to have. And obviously a good number of them are then opting to do that. But it all comes back from building an amazing game at its core. So hopefully that gives you a good backdrop on Joyride and what we're up to.
No, this was awesome. I guess I kind of skipped over the part. The reason why I asked the joy or the kind of the trick shot conversation first, aside from kind of Joyride as a whole, is because I wanted to save the kind of development stuff of each of the individual packages for later. But while we're here, let's do that. How does each one of one of the games that most impressed me was Stardew Valley here, and it fits some of this idea too, which is built around a game that clearly focuses on community building, whether it's with a non-character or not, whether it's someone out in the world or it's just within the video game. But it was produced by one person and launched basically entirely by one person. So I'm interested in how you would build a space where you end up with these types of builders, where you have a one-off game producer that just makes this home run that no one would have expected. How does a game producer like that interact with Joyride then?
I would say there's probably a few approaches. We have these specific ecosystems that we're then providing a lot of support for, but it's obviously for games of a particular type. So for our mobile casual ecosystem, those are for games that lend themselves to easy play, but also like a competitive dynamic where you can compete with other people, whether synchronously or asynchronously. Our sports and action games in Champs are really, suitable for people who want to build avatar-centric sports and action games, right? And so for that type of builder who has an expertise in avatar-based games, for example, we give them the support they need that allows them to just focus on building an excellent avatar-based game that is the moment-to-moment gameplay that a consumer would be interacting with. And we're able to accelerate their time to market and really provide the resources to them to be competitive in the market with the meta game and the economy and all the other considerations that it takes to actually build a more robust economy-based game around that core gameplay. And so if a particular developer, whether a creator or a small studio or even a large studio, has interest in building games that fall into these design patterns, we can absolutely interact with them and support them by providing them a pretty holistic solution in partnership to take it to market. One of the programs that we do intend to launch in the new year is a publishing program that is actually more generalist in nature, where what we want to do is offer developers the benefit of our wallet and the benefit of the user base that is using our wallet to access our existing games. And with that publishing program, we would offer a third opportunity and a third way that developers can work with us, where if they have a complete game of their own that hangs together and they want to bring it to market, we can basically partner with them to publish that game. We can provide them a wallet solution that would help onboard their consumers onto blockchain for their games. And we can also obviously market the game to our, at this point, millions of players who are already using our wallet to interact with our existing games. And so, in terms of a developer offering, that would, I think, open up the funnel to a lot more developers who already have, complete games that don't necessarily fall into one of these specific design patterns.
So let's focus on the kind of individual tokenomics and its relationship to the Joyride platform. So I saw
Mhm.
both Trickshot and Solitaire have individual token sets, which JRX and RLY, if I'm correct,
Actually, we actually use the rally token in our games at the
for
moment
both.
for both. Correct.
Okay. Did I read somewhere that there was a different token? Would that have?
No, we are, at some point we will absolutely be launching our GRX token, which will then be powering our game ecosystem as well. But for the moment, we've partnered with Rally, and they've been amazing partners to us as we've basically been launching and scaling our titles, utilizing their token in the games.
Ah, okay. Yes. So I didn't, the coming soon
Yeah,
above the tennis champs JRX. I
that's
see
right.
the coming soon now.
Yeah. I
So
mean, if,
how,
basically, we want to make
yeah,
sure that before we launch our own protocol and token, that it has a value proposition that is differentiated out in the world beyond just being another transactional token that happens to be what we use in our games.
yeah. So tell us about this part.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, there's lots of tokens, that already exist that can be used transactionally, and simply having one that indexes to your game ecosystem, to me, is not necessarily the best reason to then go off and build it. Uh, what we have planned, though, is a protocol that can be more, I'd say, more cohesive, not just in providing capabilities to consumers to utilize the tokens in games in a specialized way, but also to the needs of game developers as they're building and launching their games. And so we do have plans to launch this protocol and sponsor it, I should say, as an initial developer utilizing it. But it is not yet live, and we haven't yet fully announced it publicly yet. But there are impending plans. But what we didn't want to do was hold up the launch and scaling of our games for the sake of having our own token. And that's where we've partnered with Rally, who have been amazing partners to us as we've been building and scaling Solitaire Blitz and Trickshot Blitz today, and as we continue launching. I should also mention that we are sort of multi-chain in our support, in the sense that our wallet supports Ethereum, it supports Flow, it supports Solana. However, for the games we've already launched, we are utilizing the Flow blockchain as our kind of repository of blockchain data in these games. And again, that's also been a great experience as we continue to scale these titles with Flow as the underlying L1.
Awesome. Yep. One of the parts here, again, I think that's so important is that the internal ownership aspect.
Mhm.
We've never been allowed to participate in the upside of almost any company that you help grow.
Mhm.
Simple examples like, okay, Netflix, you could pay $12 a month to waste your time, but you can't pay that extra $12 a month to own micro shares of Netflix in any way. It's this kind of aberration where all the small peasant people have been regulated out of the ownership economy, and there's no easy way for them to participate. And what I like about this is that technology kind of builds in this ownership aspect. One of the things I wanted to focus in on is,
Mhm.
and I'll kind of preface it with another thought process here. I look at a company like Red Bull; they're doing billions of dollars a year in revenue. They spend billions of dollars a year in marketing. They spend like $3 billion a year in marketing the last time I checked. So I know that a company, once it gets big enough, it should be able to give away a fair amount of money in terms of, like, I guess you could call them loyalty points. What it could be anything, literally. What if they were just to turn around and give away $3 billion a year, they'd have an extraordinarily happy customer base. I actually make the argument that one of the things that Web3 has figured out is that instead of giving your marketing budget away to marketers necessarily, you should be giving your marketing budget back to the people who are paying into the community, and then they, as being more prosperous, they give back as well. So one of the things I wanted to ask, and this is the question portion, kind of prefaced by the thought process, is where's the kind of break even point and growth process take place for there's enough community members that are willing to pay on a month over month basis where the company is generating money so that you can start having that, well, we have like X amount of dollars to give back to our community every year. It's kind of, that's how I see the best relationship of some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest, when you think about products, like in the free-to-play space, you were typically building games where only 1 to 3% of your players ever pulled out their wallet and paid you, and everyone else was playing the game. But the business model relied on those enthusiastic supporters to actually pull out their wallets and pay you for a typical casual game. I mean, different genres of games have different metrics, but like this 2% number is sort of the average that people utilize.
Okay.
And what I think is interesting in Web3 is that it allows you to focus on the enthusiasts as your audience, because the business model can revolve around them, provided you have an effective economy and an effective experience for them that can engage them and make them feel like owners and participate in your economy over the long term as the engaged community members. And so in a way, you're able to really design for that enthusiast community because they are more directly aligned with the success of your title as well. And in a way, as a result, your marketing is also almost more efficient when the community grows organically, because with free-to-play games, you're out there adding 1 million people to find the 10,000 or 20,000 who are actually going to pay you. Whereas here, finding the 10 or 20,000 people who care enough to support your project and be a part of it and be active community members and then help, power your game, like you can almost attract them organically and have them grow with you as a result. Now, I do feel like at the end of the day, it's not puristically one. It's not going to be purely one or the other. Like, I do think that part of the challenge and part of what we are working on is how do we engage audiences broadly who may not be aware of blockchain, who may not be aware of crypto, and who may not be aware of what playing a blockchain-powered game can enable for them in the way of features and customer experience. And so we have to engage them in a way where they're just like, hey, yeah, I'm just playing this fun game. And then as they play this fun game over time, they discover what they can do with the crypto features and get excited to take advantage of that, right? So in a way, like, we are taking a slightly more hybridized approach because we are building games for everybody. And some of those everybody have no idea what crypto is or what blockchain is until they come in and discover it. But I would say that, as you earn your core community and especially pre-launch, you really do have the opportunity to zero in on and work with your most ardent supporters from the outset, which is, to me, a very different development process than what we would have to follow for a traditional free-to-play game, where you knew you had to design an experience for everybody to then find the people who care.
Right. There's two ideas that come up there. I'm sure you've probably heard of the band Radiohead, but at scale, after they are already famous, they, just for fun, they sold an album where it was basically, I think you could download it for free, or you could pay as much as you want. And it actually ended up making them the most money they had made on a record sale to that date, I believe. What you're finding too, I think this is interesting, is that the free to play sector kind of naturally had some of it, the best things going. Like, all these products are like, hey, it's actually free. But again, the downside is as they grow from free, they become, like Angry Birds, some billions of dollars in revenue. They become worth a lot of money. And the original people who made the game, what it was get nothing back for any of that, basically. And it's like, well, the reason the game has always been so valuable is because of the players. If you don't have other people to play against, the game's not valuable. So how do we make sure that every community member knows how valuable they are?
Yeah, but see, but I think with Web3, the exciting thing is that if you've designed your economy well, like, naturally, the players who joined earlier would own assets that are becoming more valuable as the economy scales and as the game scales, right? And
Yes.
so you've got natural, like, your core community will always be rewarded disproportionately if the game is successful and if the game, grows and has, gains momentum. I do think the danger is obviously that the economy has to be designed carefully, because a lot of the early games suffered from inflationary economies where success almost seeded the difficulties that they were going to run into later. But a lot of that, in my view, came from the fact that many of these early titles were, I mean, we have to remember, they were launched at a time when no one expected them to work. Like they were either launched as experiments by small teams that were trying to figure out if there was something there, and they discovered that there was and it took off, right? Or there were quick follows from teams that were trying to do a money grab. But in both cases, they didn't have the luxury of taking a step back and designing an elder game and an economy for a mature game, as opposed to a game that's going through like a fast growth cycle. Because every game, whether it's free to play or Web3, has to deal with that issue, right? Any free to play game is eventually going to saturate its market, and its user base is going to peak and then come down again. And over time, asymptotically get closer and closer to the payers, as the more casual dilettantes leave. That happens with every free-to-play game. However, those games just do they've evolved as a domain now, to where people know the playbook preemptively to be able to build the features they need for that game to remain vital for the long term and to remain sustainable and relevant for the long term for that core community, right? And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of the early games that we've seen in Web3 so far weren't able to really invest in that end game preemptively, and as a consequence saw this rise and crash sort of cycle, which obviously hurts everybody, but especially pains early community members who put in the initial faith and energy to get the project going, right? But I totally agree with you. I do think one of the real benefits of this Web3 games ecosystem is the ability to align a reward system with the game success that rewards early community members and your biggest supporters most, like in an aligned way. I think the challenge is actually still working out what those schemes should be, right? Like I think at the moment, you had this like whitelist and grind on Discord to get on the whitelist, and like all these like very blunt capabilities that have fostered a culture of people scrambling and grinding for economic payout because they wanted to get on the whitelist to be able to get something that they could then flip, etc. But I do think there's a shift now where you're seeing quality projects focus less on just the economic payout as the carrot, and instead actually rewarding engagement and other authentic actions to know that the community members who are getting the benefits are the community members that are most valuable to them as well.
Well, this, with your time in the VC world, but in San Francisco as well, not just on the VC side of the table, but on the employment side. Well, all the time in these early companies, they're looking at for compensation packages for early product and team members. Effectively, they're like, okay, well, we're not going to pay you a huge salary right now. We're going to compensate you with some types of option package. It's just so astounding that this hasn't been carried over to the customer base, who is literally everything in terms of what the company is built off of, right? I've never seen a more vocal supporter than when you get like $100,000 airdropped to you because you happen to think apes were interesting. So this entirely unique branding set, I think, has been birthed out of this, which is that goal to, as we grow, we give you guys back the value. Venture capital had locked everything up in the background. The Coinbase IPO is a fantastic example. The VCs keep it in the background. Hardly anybody can invest unless you get in a particular time. And then everybody who's used the company, who's made the platform what it is, basically gets nothing. They get a public pump and dump, a very highly regulated pump and dump, after the company had been jacked up in value way beyond belief, for the average participant to go and basically get rugged on to 80 to 90% of whatever that current market top was. So whether it's a new school variation of venture capital or kind of this old school model, that grind for economic placement has just never been available to the average participant in any way, shape, or form. Like the fact that you're seeing, here's another way to put this question: what's the demographic of the game players look like? Are you seeing hotspots pop up in unique areas you didn't expect?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we haven't made our games available in the US. due to
That's just
regulatory
smart.
compliance. And we are engaged in a process to be able to do that, but we need to dot I's and cross T's. So they're available globally at the moment. We've definitely seen hotspots in the Philippines, in the Middle East, and in Indonesia. So it's Southeast Asia, I would say, and India, as well as Brazil has emerged as an interesting market for us also. And so I would say, across Europe, we do have participants as well, but it hasn't been with the same energy or scale that we're seeing from markets like the Philippines and India and Brazil and other sort of emerging markets. And to me, I think it's a little bit of the sort of familiarity that a lot of these markets already have with Web3 tools, because as you started, as you mentioned, as we were chatting earlier, if you're in Kenya, you just have a higher need to figure out Web3 as a means of financial infrastructure than if you're in a more mature market. And so I think a little bit of the early enthusiasm is probably reflected by that, and also reflected by the virality that I think these markets can also exhibit, because we've been, obviously lucky enough to have been growing with a lot of viral organic interest in what we've built. But we are seeing inroads into Europe as well. But I would say Philippines, Brazil, India are probably key markets for us.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great news. I think it's, yeah, as we had started the conversation at the beginning of this, this idea of digital ownership in someone's hands who really has no access to those concepts, and like, you can't open a bank account because you don't have ID, but they can get a cell phone and they can open a game and they can start an online game identity that owns, like, this seems so genius to me. It's my favorite part of the sector. Remember, I went from mostly only caring about the technology, be like, wow, I love games. This is the space to be now. Games going to open the door to everyone trying to understand, like, maybe sovereign identity. This is fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
I would say though that philosophically, we are committed to the concept that we build fun games. Like that's our
I'm
dedication.
glad there's you
right?
guys, because I'm not a fun game person. My the question that brought me here was like, how do you get to sovereign identity or sovereign money? Those aren't necessarily fun games. Those are actually pretty difficult games to get in the conversation with. Like, nobody wants to talk about politics, right? Right. It's like,
Yeah.
well, so games has been this unique kind of
No. The reason I
leveler
mentioned that
for
is
me. I
because
love
I
it.
actually think the strength of games is that they are games, right? So,
Yes,
like,
I agree.
if you go out and you try and create financial infrastructure for financial infrastructure, that's fraught with all kinds of problems, right? Like
Yes.
regulatory, otherwise. But like our commitment is to build fun games, and obviously we're only going to build them in a manner that is, regulatorily compliant. But at the end of the day, philosophically, as we began our conversation, we're building games that are fun to play with the potential to own assets. But we are not trying to build games that are trying to serve a min-max, like, economic, reason to play as their reason for being. Because to me, any sort of effort like that is ultimately going to result in a meltdown, because you're trying to construct an artificial economy that in which there's arbitrage for people, which just isn't sustainable as a motivator. And so it has to be financially robust, but it has to be a financially robust game that people are playing because it's fun. And obviously part of the fun involves the opportunity to own and the opportunity to engage with, blockchain-based gameplay. But it's all geared towards engendering fun amongst the players versus, simply trying to give them a money grab opportunity in the guise of a game.
Yeah, the games are as old as mankind. Language, borders, cultures. Everybody has games, and identity as well. This were the other key issues around the games I thought was so valuable. How people contribute and they're sharing within the ecosystem. There's a bunch I don't know about kind of the old gaming sector, so I'm kind of daft when it comes to understanding it. That's why when I view it from this perspective of, why I've loved this technology for so long, why I'm still here. How do we get more people interested in the things that I like? Because, well, there's a lot of people that like games. So there's a beautiful synergy there. So tell us a little bit about what we can expect next over the coming months, the next suites of games that you guys are working on. What's the roadmap for the next
Sure,
few quarters?
sure. So I'd say you will continue to see new games in the kind of solitaire blitz, trick shot blitz genre, where we're going to be releasing casual, approachable, easily playable games. And our internal cadence is roughly one a month. I think we have an opportunity to perhaps exceed that, but that's sort of what we're managing to make sure that every game gets its time in the sun and is a good, high quality experience. In addition, and I'd say even very exciting for our Tennis Champs community, I think you will see our Tennis Champs role-playing game. We just announced we opened it up to all Tennis Champs Genesis holders in beta this week. And so any holder of a Tennis Champ NFT is now able to use it in the game and play it. And it's in sort of open beta for Champs holders. And you will see us coming to market with that game over the course of the fall as we continue polishing it and building it out as our first NFT-based game. And I think in general, there are some upcoming announcements as we not only build the Tennis Champs game, but also the universe in which our Tennis Champs characters live and play and compete, because that universe is one that we are very excited about because it transcends the games to really being a franchise that we intend to then launch additional games into over the course of 2023. So it's going to be an exciting fall, and we're really looking forward to it.
Lost Omar there for a sec, ladies and gentlemen.
Hello?
We'll see if he comes back. There he is. He's back now.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, Zoom seems to have hiccuped for a second.
It's okay. It's okay. You're back. Awesome. Well, that's exciting. Hopefully we can have another podcast where we'll do a live gaming sit down and play a few of the games together. I think that'd be fun.
That'd be great.
So what else am I as a non-gamer? What are the things that I'm missing? I can clearly tell that the Web2 gaming community doesn't really like having NFTs, or maybe there's some discord and just in how people understand. Like I think people don't even understand the difference between money and currency yet still largely, let alone like why ownership and earning are important functions in this side. What are some of the things I'm missing? Like what are the questions I'm not asking that I should be asking, Omar?
I would say we're going to see a transformation of games as financial products in Web3 to games as entertainment products in Web3. And I think it's a natural maturation of the space. And I think, and you can look at earlier platforms that emerged or earlier disruptions that emerged for the same, right? Like when, for example, free-to-play emerged, your first instantiation of games were much more mechanical in nature and designed to promote virality, because virality was the new currency that free-to-play games on Facebook discovered. And that first generation of titles were geared up to be hyper viral, but weren't very good games. I mean, they were, text-based RPGs and just very basic.
Oregon Trail, that's all I remember.
Yeah, but very basic. But that was the first generation, and it was meant to be basic because people were still understanding and learning. And you also saw a huge reaction to free to play from quality game developers at the time, because they looked at this emerging space. They saw the products in that space that looked exploitative and looked crappy, and they had a negative reaction to it. I think we're going through a similar moment in Web3, where you've had an initial generation of products that have really valuably for the rest of us, like scoped out the opportunity and the territory. But you've also had a reaction to it because it's new and different. And traditional gamers and traditional game developers are still trying to get their arms around it. But I would say over the next 3 to 5 years, we are going to see Web3 games permeate as a business model for games. but I think it's not this dividing line between Web2 games and Web3 games. I think it's just going to be ownership of assets in digital economies will become a natural means by which you're going to be expected to design products that enable that capability. And so I think there's going to be a little bit of a breakdown of this like dichotomy as well, to where this just becomes another lever to build a great game with an engaged community that cares about the success of the title. But it has to start and end with being an entertainment experience, not a financial product for speculators, not a financial product for public markets, but an amazing entertainment experience.
Awesome. Yeah, here's my last question. You kind of went into it here, but I'll try to spin it properly, which is, what's something that you believe very deeply, yet almost everyone else disagrees with you in?
I think, I believe that play to earn is not the path to building an amazing game. And I think about a year ago, we started talking about play and own as like a better reframing of the opportunity. And at the time, we had a lot of community members who found that odd. They're like, wait a second, why would I want to be a part of this community if you're not going to like help me earn? And like that was like the initial reaction. But I actually think that we've seen our community and we've seen the market, I think, turn in recent months to recognizing that the path to greatness in building great entertainment products is providing experiences that are excellent, and the community has to be rewarded and has to, be like feel privileged and feel excited about aligning with you in bringing those to market. But you can't design it with a mindset around earning as the goal. And so I would say that as a design principle was probably more controversial 6 to 12 months ago than it is today. But it is something that we do hold fast to and continue to double down on every day, because we think it's the path to building something really meaningful and sizable for the community over the long term.
Yeah, I agree. This is one of the weird aspects about nomenclature or vocabulary. The definitions of things in our generation has just gone totally askew. It appears sometimes, but it's important how we define specific ideas. Are we owning? Are we earning? What's the relationship between this? Should we be earning and owning regardless this whole time anyways? I think, and this is where where we agree deeply, is that people should have just been rewarded and way freaking more than they were for all of the multi-billion-dollar companies that have kind of grown up off their back, selling them, advertising it effectively. So I think there is a better model to be found here as well, where the people that helps build the early community support, even if they were not investors, but they find a way to participate in what hopefully ends up being a multi-billion-dollar version of the idea they thought was interesting.
That's right.
Omar, I've had a great time chatting with you. You're clearly a brilliant individual. I look forward to the next one. Let's do a game catch up. We'll do tennis match on the next one. We'll play
Definitely.
some games.
Awesome. You can exercise your fingers and like be ready to swipe madly in tennis champs.
Yes, I'm spoiled. I got the ice bath. I swim 3 small laps. Like my outside life is not a gamer life, but I'm fascinated by the fact that you've got something that transcends language, culture. Quite often you can have people from so many different parts of the world playing these games together, and that's really things that unify people and enrich their life is one of, that's why we're here on this mission as well. So Omar, it's been a pleasure chatting. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it. I'll keep you on for just a minute or two afterwards.
Yes.
Bear family, if you made it through the hour of conversation, I really appreciate you. We like doing these long form so I can go through discovery mode. Basically, I don't know anything about games. Half the time it's me trying to learn on the fly. So I appreciate. If you want to check out Joyride Games, I suggest you do. All their links are down below. Remember, be careful of clicking on links, but here, so the right links. We verified them ourselves. We've gone through to make sure. Omar, one last time, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.